Hey, how you doing? This is Derek Alexander with Greater Works Wealth, and today we're going to discuss specifically some benefits that we've seen working with AEP employees, but also this is going to be in general. This could actually be applicable to multiple individuals that may be in a similar situation with similar benefits. But specifically, what I've seen working with AEP employees, maybe those that may be in upper management, is they really kind of got a depth of benefits to navigate. One, they usually have a pension, depending on if they were part of the CSW acquisition. They may have an older pension that may be different than, or they may have been grandfathered into that CSW pension, which is different than the traditional AEP pension plan. From there, you still have your 401k, also navigating if you have LTIPs, which is long-term incentive plans. How do you navigate those concentrated AEP stock positions? And should you diversify? Should you not? Also, there are brokerage accounts that are listed as transfer on death, but essentially those are individual accounts that can be holding cash and then navigating your medical insurance, especially if you're retiring before age 65, depending on if you're using the HRA plan, what does it look like to convert once you retire, and then if you're using the HSA. So these are quite a few benefits. Now, the great thing is that is awesome. Those are great benefits and there are a plethora of them. But when you start getting into retirement, you start trying to figure out how is all this going to work together? Where do we pull money from? When do we pull that money? How do I not make a mistake? And today we're going to walk through some of those questions that kind of help you navigate these conversations. In the future, what we'll do is kind of have individual breakdowns of how we actually walk through this with clients per each section, because each section is a little bit of a deep dive. But starting with the pension to me is the most critical piece. And I remember we had a number of people come to us that just said, "Hey, we just automatically roll it over." And what I said was, let's do the math. you know, so understanding, does it make sense to take a long-term to take the income, or does it make sense to just roll those funds over? And largely, what I would say is it depends. And we'll cover this in another video, but it really boils down, and this is going to be super general, is how long do you expect to live? Right? That's really the biggest piece. If you're somebody that's, you know, a little bit more, I would say maybe not morbid is the best word, but it's if you're somebody that's like, hey man, I don't know if I'll be here, it makes sense to probably take that account and invest it. But you also got to look at, if you take the monthly income, there's also a spousal benefit that you can choose to take. It lowers the amount you receive monthly, but in the event of one of you passing away, if you're in that pension plan, that benefit goes to your spouse. So that's also a part of the math. But that's usually the thought process is, if we invest that money and we're able to get a higher rate of return versus monthly income. And that's really just going to kind of boil down to how long we're planning to live, and what's the bet that we're wanting to take. With the 401k, we've had situations where somebody's maxed out their 401k pre-tax, but then maybe they had some after-tax dollars that had already been taxed but have grown. So in that situation, one thing we want to look at is, of course, we don't want to take those pre-tax dollars and start being taxed on them. So usually pre-tax dollars go to pre-tax dollars. So from a 401k to a traditional IRA. But in the after-tax section, what we looked at doing was, let's break them apart. So let's move our earnings, because that would be taxable, to our traditional IRA. And let's take the cost basis in our after-tax portion and we roll that into a Roth IRA, because we've already been taxed on those dollars. And that's a simple way that we've seen these situations help. Regarding your AEP stock position, now this is a unique conversation that I would say would be different from household to household. Also depends on how much of that AEP stock position is going to be needed to be used as income. Right? There are a lot of different situations that could occur. If you're somebody that your pension and your social security, make up the bulk of your living expenses, it could be great. And you have um, a positive outlook on what you think AEP is going to do over the next 30 to 50 years. it may make sense to hold that AEP stock position. But let's say we actually going to need to make some withdrawals. Uh, some of the things that we like to look at is, is this concentrated position best for over, the next 30, 40, 50 years, especially if we're needing the liquidity to be able to live off of. So that's where we'll have a conversation and we're looking at, does this make sense to hold this much of this position? Now there are some pros to holding that position, especially if you're looking at leaving it to the second generation or legacy planning. But those are questions that we would more than likely navigate. Also, is with some of the benefits in the plan, there's a 3-year vesting schedule. And what we've seen is over time that they will disperse once a year. So sometimes you could retire, you could have invested, but they won't get kicked out until over the next 3 years of retirement. So that's something that we don't want to miss. And sometimes what those could get kicked out into or where they're being held at is in a brokerage account that they call a TOD account. The bulk of these benefits are usually held at Empower, but as soon as you start getting into like the stock options and things like that, those are usually held at the Fidelity account. But usually there may be a brokerage account there that has some after tax dollars that you may need to look at, figuring out what to do with. Um, so the great thing is there's so much. I mean, it's such a robust retirement plan and system. It is a little bit, a lot to navigate. So that's why we always start with what's the plan. We want to put together how is all this gonna will come together and create a monthly income for you based upon your goals and your dreams. And I don't like calling it retirement. We call it work optionality. So when you're achieving work optionality, you're now at the point where you get to choose who you want to work for and how much you want to work. What are these next steps gonna be? So we're going to continue to make more videos specifically breaking down each individual benefit within the AEP position. But for those who are even if you have a stock position and you're looking at retirement, the same questions are going to apply. If you have a pension plan and you're looking at retirement, the same questions are going to apply. How are all these working together in the best interest of your goals and your wants? Now I have to say this isn't advice, so always consult a professional before you take action. But if you ever have any questions or you'd like to schedule a call about your specific situation, feel free to use the link below to schedule some time. Look forward to speaking.